Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dattitude. It is the final episode of 2022, but no worries. No worries. We'll be okay. And so will Jeff Duncan. He's just swirling himself around. It's all good. We're going to talk today Saints at Eagles. LSU playing in the Citrus Bowl against Purdue, and of course the Tulane Green Wave in the Cotton Bowl against the USC Trojans. Hello, Jerry, and hello, CJ. We thank you for joining us. We already got some hellos this morning. Dunk, what is going on?
Well, I had to pull a Drew Brees at the line of scrimmage and call an audible here at the last minute. That's why I'm scrambling around. We got storms in the area, knocked out all my power, knocked out my internet. Power's back, internet's not. So what can I say? I'm not the most tech-savvy guy in the world. I'm doing my best with my phone.
Man, you are a trooper then. I mean, you have done a great job. I got to tell you, I'd have laid 8-1 odds that you would have not – if you would have told me that happened just before we were supposed to go on, I would have laid 8-1 odds your face would not be on my screen right now.
I know. The power of technology. And look, it happened 5 minutes before we went on.
That is massively impressive.
One of those little blinks of power, that's all it took. Just a little.
Yeah, we've had a couple blinks here this morning. Luckily, I think the worst is through, so I just jinxed myself. And if I go off the air, I lay 100-1 odds that Jeff Duncan doesn't know how to finish this show.
That's true.
So I'd have to go figure that out on my own with my phone. So we are here this morning. Lots of things to talk about. If you want to join the show and be a part of it, comment stream on YouTube and Facebook. We would love to have you. All you got to do is post a comment, and it will show up in my stream, and we will show it on the air, assuming it is relevant to what we're talking about.
Or not vulgar.
Or not vulgar, right? It doesn't have to be relevant. You can say Happy New Year if you want. I mean, just don't be a jerk. I mean, that's all we ask, really.
We get enough of that and other social
in our email.
Twitter.
All right, let's start here. We're going to kind of go all over the place. Usually we spend this show talking about the Saints, but we're going to kind of go all over the place. But I do want to start with the Saints because, Dunk, there are some fans out there, and God bless them. I think if you're excited about the possibility of the Saints going to the playoffs, good for you. There is a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. Yes, I am saying there's a chance. The Saints beat the Eagles on Sunday. If Carolina beats Tampa Bay on Sunday, the Saints will be alive for the NFC South Championship heading into the final week of the 2022-23 season.
Yeah, and then all they'd have to do is beat Carolina, I think, in New Orleans to get in. But there's a lot of work that has to be done for that to happen. I just think this weekend is about as bad a matchup as the Saints could possibly have.
No question.
The only thing that is in their favor is Jalen Hurts might not play. I mean, otherwise it looks pretty ugly in every factor for me. So the fact that Philly ended up losing to Dallas the week before did the Saints no favors. They've got to have this game. I don't see, barring a bunch of turnovers by Gardner Minshew and fumbles, I just don't see how they can keep pace with Philly because I think Philly's going to score some points.
Well, let's get right into the matchup because, and I don't usually go into this early, but when you look at some of these numbers, I'm going to show you some things that should be scary for you because the Eagles are the best in the NFL against the pass. So that is not good news for Andy Dalton fans across the Dattitude platform here. And I don't know what the hell is going on with Alvin Kamara. We've seen some weird things going on. He missed some practice because of quote-unquote personal reasons. And Dennis Allen's response was, we'll let him tell you. Well, of course he's not going to tell you. And then you look at some of the other matchups, and the Eagles are just – we saw what happened last year against the Eagles. I think it was 40-29 or somewhere along those lines. Fourth in rushing offense, that's a lot because of Jalen Hurts. Ninth in passing offense, that's all because of Jalen Hurts. Third in total offense. The Saints have been much better against the pass, but you kind of have to take that second place ranking, Dunk, with a grain of salt because last week they basically gave up nothing against Deshaun Watson, that sheet of ice. But I'm not taking away from how the Saints have improved on defense over the past few weeks.
No, I just feel like, this game is going to come down to a lot of games in the NFL, trench warfare. The Saints won that battle last week against Cleveland. It's a whole different level of competition this week. The Eagles have the best offensive line in the NFL, even without Lane Johnson, who's not going to play their starting right tackle. Their offensive line, I think, sending 3 guys to the Pro Bowl. And their defensive line, I tell you who they remind me of, Jim, and old school Saints fans remember this. The first Saints team I ever covered was the 2000 Saints. Jim Haslett's first year. They had Leroy Glover, Darren Howard, Norman Hand, Joe
First
Johnson.
ever playoff victory.
Yes, they had 66 sacks that year, a franchise record. They'll never break that record again, I don't think. I don't think we'll see that happen. The Eagles have 60 sacks right now. They lead the NFL, 2 games to play. They have a chance. They've had 6 or more sacks in their last 3 games. So if they can keep doing that, they could break the Chicago Bears record of 72 in a season. They get after you from all angles of their defensive line, not just the edge guys, their interior guys. Javon Hargraves, great pass rusher. To me, it comes down to that. Can the Saints protect Andy Dalton? I don't know how they're going to do it. They're missing Cesar Ruiz. We don't know Andres Pete's status. To me, this is just a difficult matchup, and the Eagles have to have the game. So they're going to be playing with motivation. It just looks like an ugly matchup to me.
What are you talking about, man? Calvin Throckmorton has got this down, pal.
Yeah.
He can block those guys.
The one good thing is they're getting in characteristically warm weather. I think it's in the 60s in Philly right now. So,
yes.
Not going to be frigid like it was in Cleveland last week. So it should be conducive to moving the ball. Hopefully Chris Olave is able to play. We don't know his status, but that's a big keg for them. They have to have him in the lineup, I think, to even have a chance. And then they've got to get some turnovers. Minshew, if he does play, and I expect Minshew to play, I think they'll rest Hurts another week. This is just my speculation, but I don't think they want to put him out there less than 100% when all they need is one more win to lock this thing up. And Minshew played well last week. So Minshew, though, will turn the ball over. We saw it last week against Dallas. They'll put the ball into tight coverage. The Saints might get Lattimore back this week, but I don't even think that matters. Their corners are playing very well, as your stats pointed out. I mean, the Saints' pass defense is right now the strength of this team. And those young guys, I think, give a lot of optimism for the future.
Sean Berthelot, I'm going to get to your question in just a minute. It's because it's an important one, and we are going to talk about it in just a moment. Jerry, I'll show your comment in just a moment, too. I do want to say a couple things, though. First off, I don't understand why the Eagles would even contemplate playing Jalen Hurts this week. But that being said, the line movement tells me that they are going to play Jalen Hurts. The Sharps know before anyone else. You can talk about all you want about the Adam Schefters of the world and all these other people that are on and have inside information. No one knows the inside information like these Sharps do. And for the line to go from 5 to 6.5 in a day tells me that Jalen Hurts is playing. And again, he was at practice in a limited capacity. I get that one more win and they clinch the number 1 seed. They don't need Jalen Hurts to beat the Saints, I don't think. So you're throwing out there a lot. I mean, I think that's taking a huge risk, Dunk, if they decide to do that, as we throw up the graphic here and show you the spreads. But I don't know why they would even think about using Jalen Hurts.
I know, but look, this is the locker room. Now, again, I'm just reading online, so I'm not there. But reading between the lines, the Eagles players seem to think they're going to rest Jalen Hurts the way they're talking. But again, lots of times the players don't even know,
right?
With a quarterback decision like this. And I agree with you. I mean, Minshew's fine. They'll be fine with Minshew if they use him for another week. It sounds like Miles Sanders is going to play. At least he said he was going to play. I think the big concern for the Saints is, like you said, is Alvin Kamara going to play? I mean, if they don't have Alvin Kamara in this game, I don't see how they keep up at all.
No, because they're going to have to get Taysom. Taysom going to have to run all over the place. It's not going to happen. Here you look at the spreads again. This had dropped as low as -5 for Philadelphia. It is going up in about, I'd say, 36 hours. It has gone from -5 to -6.5. And it was -6.5 to start. So it's not like it just got thrown out there. So this line has gone from, in fact, I think I even saw a 7. This line has gone from 7 to 5, back now to 6.5. And I got to be honest, unless it comes out that Jalen Hurts is not playing, this line is not going to go lower than this. So if they come out and say Jalen Hurts is not going to play, it will drop back down to 5.5. But right now, that's where it is. Eagles are basically a almost 3-1 favorite over the Saints to win the game. Total of 42. That is going up a little bit. That also tells me that the sharps think that Jalen Hurts is playing. Just as some strange lines here going on. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen. I want to get to, because we want to move around this morning, and we're not going to spend the 40 minutes or so that we normally spend on the Saints. We will end the show with our predictions for the Saints, LSU, and Tulane. We're not going to give them right off the bat, but I think you can see where we're going with the Saints. I think Duncan and I are in agreement here. Sean Berthelot says, forget this season. Let's talk about next season and who will be the Saints coach next season. Chances of Sean Payton coming back. Dunk, I'm going to steal your thunder here. Dennis Allen is going nowhere. So it's to the point now where it doesn't matter what they do in their last 2 games unless he gets caught out on Bourbon Street doing something he's not supposed to do, and Dennis Allen is not going to do that because that's not who he is. So Dennis Allen is about a 99.2% chance that Dennis Allen is the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I think there's a 60% chance, maybe 70%, that there's a new offensive coordinator. But Sean Payton is not coming to back to New Orleans, and neither is Tom Brady. All these goofy rumors thrown out by NBC to get clicks, not happening. Am I right, Dunk?
Yes, you're correct. Unless something unforeseen happens, everything I've been able to gather is, the management and ownership supporting Dennis Allen. I think they're very loyal to him right now. I think just out of principle, they would like to give him another year. They feel like this year kind of was a little bit of an anomaly with the injuries and a lot of the flukish things that happened. That could be a mistake. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I'm just telling you how they're thinking on Airline Drive. Now, I don't close the window on anything happening, though. I mean, the NFL's crazy. Things happen. But I would say right now the thinking is he'll be back. They're happy that the team's fought these last 2 weeks and got 2 wins. Now, I think a little bit of that, not to be too critical. I mean, obviously winning in Cleveland in that condition, beating Atlanta at home. But, that doesn't totally impress me. I thought they'd win both those games. They barely won both of them. It took last minute kind of survival to win both of them. So I think you could, as a Saints fan, I don't think you want to get too caught up in that they won these 2 games, but they are fighting and they are playing hard. And I think that means a lot when seasons start to go south like the way the Saints have. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Payton just sat out all next year and see if the landscape materializes with better options, because there's not a lot of really attractive options right now.
I think it's better than 50-50 at this point. With looking at what's going to be out there, I think it's better than 50-50 that Sean Payton does not coach next year. He's not going to rush for a job. There's no reason for him to rush. The Saints still own his rights for 2 more years after this, correct? Mm-hmm. So, it's not like the Saints are, and I mean, they'd love to have a number 1 pick next year, but that's probably not going to happen at this point. So Sean Payton is not going to rush into a job. I still think that there's the rumors that have been swirling around for years, I think are true, that he's going to wait and see if Dallas spits the bit in the first round of the playoffs, which I think they're going to, even if they play Tampa Bay. I think Dallas is overrated. And even if they don't, and McCarthy comes back, I think that something's going to happen next year. And there is a short leash in Dallas. Jerry Jones, like 82 years old now. He wants to win a championship before he passes on. So he's not sitting around waiting. So I think that even if McCarthy makes it through this year, I'd be surprised if he makes it through next year unless they do something big, and they're not waiting around. So I think the whole talk for the last couple years or several years about Sean Payton being in Dallas, I think that's going to eventually happen, and they'll pay whatever it takes to get him if that's what they want. So
yeah, if they move on from McCarthy, I think he becomes the number 1 target, and it very easily could happen because Dallas fulfills all of the wish list items at the top of the wish list for Sean Payton. I mean, he wants to go somewhere where he can win. I mean, he's motivated to win another Super Bowl. Look, all coaches want to win a Super Bowl. I know that sounds, pretty basic, but if he wins another one, I mean, he's a surefire Hall of Fame coach. That means a lot to him, and he wants to. I don't think he's in a stage of his career or life that he wants to do a do-over the way he did all the heavy lifting here in New Orleans.
Right.
I mean, he came in here. This was a blank canvas, and they had to resurrect the program, and it took a lot of work. I don't think he's going to do that again this time. I think he's going to go somewhere where he can win and win right away. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he has to have Justin Herbert to do it. I think he's confident he can get a quarterback. He can attract a good quarterback. He has a great track record. So quarterbacks will want to play in his system is what I'm saying. So I don't think just looking around the league right now and saying who's the quarterbacks. I think the only quarterback factor I would say with Sean Payton is if you have a bad quarterback situation you can't get out of. He's not going to go. And I think that's why Arizona, to me, he's not going to go to Arizona. They have terrible ownership, and they have a mess of a quarterback situation. I don't even know if he likes Kyler Murray. I don't know if he does or doesn't. I don't know his opinion on Kyler Murray. But I know one thing, that you're stuck with Kyler Murray if you go there. That contract, you're not getting out from under that one. Same thing in Denver with Russell Wilson. So those are, in my opinion, deterrents to him going to either one of those markets.
You're not only stuck with Kyler Murray, but you don't even have Kyler Murray for at least half of next year.
Right.
So that Arizona's a dumpster fire. No one. I mean, the only person that's going to take that job, assuming that Cliff Kingsbury gets fired, is someone who's just desperate to be an NFL head coach. I mean, no one in their right mind who thinks they're going to ascend is going to do it through Arizona because they're not going to be good anytime soon. Arizona is a mess, so that's not going to happen. Jerry says no on Sean Payton, Tom Brady. What about Derek Carr? I don't really agree with Jerry. If the Saints, I mean, that's actually that's a mess right now. Derek Carr's situation in Las Vegas is a mess. I could see now. Look, he's got a lot of cap space surrounding him, so the Raiders would have to eat part of his salary for him to be able to come here because the Saints can't afford. I think he's on the hook for like $23 million next year, so the Raiders would have to be willing to eat part of his salary. But Derek Carr's not going to stay in Vegas, and they're going to have to figure out what to do with him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Derek Carr, I think he was drafted by Dennis Allen, right? So, I mean, I think that could be a possibility. I think his quarterback market's going to be better than people think this offseason. It's certainly better than what the Saints currently have. I mean, Andy Dalton's played well the last few weeks, I think, in general, but they haven't played a lot of elite competition recently. And I think we're going to see on Sunday a real test of where the Saints are at the quarterback position with Andy Dalton. Now, this is the kind of game where you're going to have to make plays at quarterback, and we'll see if he can make them. If he can, I think this team will definitely – I think that even if they can't, I think they'll really strongly consider bringing him back next year, whether it's a backup role or the stopgap starter again, because they know what they have with Dalton. And the thing that is attractive about Dalton is he knows exactly who he is. He's not trying – he knows at this stage of his career he's probably going to be a backup, and he's fine with that. And I think that's a big thing to have that right attitude. One last thing on the Sean Payton thing that I want to bring up. The one sleeper team that I think would be intriguing to him would be Carolina, because they have a wide open situation there. Yeah. They have a deep-pocketed owner, David Tepper, who's very competitive. He's wired a lot like Payton. In other words, he wants to win, and that would be intriguing to Payton. That's a better roster than people think. There's a lot of good young players on that roster. And, they at one time courted Jeff Ireland, who I think would be a candidate as a general manager to go wherever Sean Payton goes. So, there's some things that add up there. The biggest question, of course, would be, would Mickey Loomis allow Sean Payton to go within the division? I would be surprised if he'd want that on his tombstone, that he let Sean Payton go, and you'd have to play him twice a year. And Sean Payton would love nothing better than to beat the Saints twice a year. I don't know if he wants to live with himself if he did that.
I think it depends on what you get, right? I mean, if there's an offer if it's an offer you can't refuse, then you got to do whatever you got to do.
They have a high pick this year. They'll have I'm not sure if they traded away this year's pick or not, but just their record alone would put it in the top 15.
I'm not sure you want to get rid of Steve Wilkes the way he's turning that team around.
Well, that's just it. But David Tepper aims high, man. This is a former a guy made billions in the hedge fund. I mean, he's aggressive. Yeah. They're getting ready. They're trying to build a new stadium there. They're, build a new practice facility, a lot of political things that would add up to going for making a splash as opposed to just keeping Steve Wilkes. You bring in Sean Payton, you get Tom Brady or somebody, suddenly that stadium deal might get done. There's a lot of factors that go into a coaching hire like this.
Jeff Duncan on the right, Jim Derry on the left. This is Dattitude live every Friday. Well, almost every Friday. I mean, some Fridays. Last Friday, I was on vacation, so we did the show on Wednesday. But mostly every Friday at 9:15 a.m. here on all these same stations. And you can be part of the show. We got some comments, and if you got a question for Dunk, if you want to make a prediction, whatever you want, if you just want to say Happy New Year, whatever it is, now's your chance. We're going to be running until about 10 a.m. this morning. Debo the God says, I'll take Jimmy G's torn ACL in a wheelchair over Derek Carr. They went 4-10 with All-Pro Adams, Waller, and Pro. Let me tell you something. That team is a mess, and it's not because of Derek Carr. I mean, he did not have his best season by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't blame Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr would be a major upgrade over what the Saints have right now. And I'm talking major upgrade, not even close upgrade to what the Saints have right now. So take that for what it's worth. Debo the God also says Sean Payton wants to flirt with teams, but he wants to go somewhere with franchise pieces. I think he left New Orleans because of the dumpster fire quarterback situation mainly. Well, it's a dumpster
That's not
fire.
Why he left New Orleans. I'm telling you, it's not why he left. It has nothing to do with it.
You would know, and I don't necessarily disagree. But first off, the dumpster fire quarterback situation is a dumpster fire quarterback situation that he created. I mean, I knew Drew Brees left, but he's the one that brought in Jameis Winston and then decided that he wanted to keep Jameis Winston. So that's a whole different story. We can talk about in the offseason.
I don't think you would have kept him last year. If he'd have stayed, I don't think Jameis Winston.
What do you think would have happened had he stayed?
I think he would have gone and got Teddy Bridgewater, and they'd have won a lot of games.
I don't disagree with that. I'm not a huge Teddy Bridgewater fan, but Teddy Bridgewater to me is an upgrade over Andy Dalton.
Yeah, he's a better Andy Dalton.
He's a better Andy Dalton. That's a good one. And he's younger.
Yeah,
I agree.
I don't think Jameis Winston would be the quarterback here. So look, they tried to make it work with Jameis Winston, and it didn't. And for whatever reason, now this is two different regimes that have basically moved on from him. And I think it says a lot. Internally, there's something going on that's amiss with Jameis Winston, because this is now what I consider three different chances he's had, right? He washed out in Tampa. He had a second life here with Sean Payton. In my research and reporting, Sean Payton was not going to bring him back this year if he stayed. So that's a second coach that's moved on. And now we saw quickly that Dennis Allen moved on right away to Andy Dalton. That's three different people moved on. At some point, it's you, not them.
I agree wholeheartedly. Debo also asked, I'm not going to post the comment because it's a little long, but he wants to know, how do we feel about Dennis saying he doubled down on trading C.J. Gardner as a business decision? Look, I brought this up several times throughout the course of the year. People keep harping on this. Look, Lord knows I've been on the Saints keister when I think it's deserved, and it's been a lot this season. I have said a lot of things that Saints organization, if they heard me say, they probably don't like. But C.J. Gardner-Johnson is not one of the problems. They had to trade him. He was going to be a problem in the locker room. They had to get rid of him. That's the best they could get for him at that time. It was the right move to make at the time, Dunk. C.J. Gardner-Johnson was not going to play in New Orleans, and he would have been nothing but a detraction in the locker room.
Yeah, I've never seen a player do what he did, where he basically wasn't practicing.
Yeah.
He was not taken to coaching.
I'm not showing up for work.
Yeah, that you can't happen. Now, I guess the argument you could make is if you had a stronger infrastructure around him, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Sometimes these things, look at the years that the Patriots had all kinds of those guys. Like, they would bring in head case players supposedly from other organizations, and they would toe the line in New England because they had a strong head coach, a strong infrastructure and culture around them, and they made it work. That would work. I mean, Sean Payton did that many times with guys like Jeremy Shockey, and I know they looked at Des Bryant.
Right.
That, they felt like they could bring in Odell Beckham Jr. last year. So there's a track record there of being able to make it work, and it didn't work quickly here with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. But look, the defense has played fine. I mean, the Saints' pass defense is among the best in the league. The one thing he did do was he had a nose for the football and could create some turnovers that has been a problem for the Saints this season. So I agree in that regard, but otherwise, I think it's been a little bit overrated, that move.
The last month of the season, I believe, the Saints are the second-ranked defense in the NFL. So, I mean, it's not the defense's fault that the Saints are 6-9. I mean, they've had their issues at different points throughout the season with injuries, but I think considering the fact that they have been without Marshawn Lattimore for 3/4 of the season and been without different players, different key players throughout parts of the season at linebacker, and the defensive backfield has been a hodgepodge, and they've pieced together the defensive line at times. The fact that they've been able to do what they've been able to do, I think says a lot for Dennis Allen, to be honest. I've been on him throughout the season, but I know people might not believe me when I say this, but I truly believe this. I think if he makes changes in his coaching staff and makes changes in his philosophy about how to coach a game and gets a real offensive coordinator who can just take control of the offense and you feel comfortable with that person in the offense. So Joe Brady, excuse me, I'm coughing. I had a little problem this morning. Somebody like that, I think Dennis Allen would be okay. And so I think he does deserve another chance, to be honest. I am not sold that he is the sole reason why the Saints are where they are. I think a lot of it has to do with personnel decisions. And you talk about this, Dunk, people have to remember that the Saints were left with this Sean Payton decision. It was an abrupt decision that no one was prepared for. I know Mickey was thinking about the future probably long-term at the time, but he had no idea that Sean wasn't going to come back for 2022 when he made that decision.
No, he didn't at all. I mean, I remember talking to him when Sean Payton was down in Cabo contemplating his career, not just Mickey, but other people in the organization. And the general thinking was Sean does this every year. He grinds through the season, and then he has this depression stage when they get beat, and he basically starts to contemplate things. And they all felt like it was just another one of those periods where he just needed to get his thoughts together. He's done it before, and he was going to come back. So, yes, it definitely surprised everyone. Everyone thought he was going to come back from Cabo and say, okay, I'm ready to go and recharge. And he didn't. So they had to go quickly into a transition stage, and they had to go through the coaching hiring process that the NFL mandates. But that said, they made some mistakes this offseason. There's no doubt. I mean, I think they are now facing a much bigger offseason transition than they had last year. I mean, I think this roster needs a lot of work, and I think it will undergo a lot of work. Now that Dennis Allen's had a year as the head coach, I think he's going to make a lot more significant changes, not just to the roster, but also probably to the offensive coaching staff. I think that definitely is an area. If you're going to sell bringing back Dennis Allen, this fan base is already kind of lukewarm on him. You've got to sell.
That's being kind when you say lukewarm.
Yeah, you've got to sell an offensive overhaul, and I think that's what probably the organization will do.
Here's what people don't understand, and this is why I'm probably a little bit more patient with the whole decision. I mean, you can't make rash decisions when you're an administrator. I mean, it's easy for fans to sit back and say so-and-so should be fired, or they need to make a move here or do this and do that. But you got to realize that as an administration, I mean, this team is in a lot of trouble going into next year. I'm not sure, A, you'd get a big-name coach who'd want to come here with the cap situation that they're under. And B, I don't know how much good it would do. So I think that Dennis Allen actually is the right person to stay here. And look, if they stink again next year, then it's a little bit easier to make a move. But let him have a full offseason to contemplate what the team needs to do, have a lot of input in that draft room, have a lot of input in the free agent moves, what moves they can possibly make, and make some changes, like you said, on offense, Dunk, because I think it's going to be a rough ride unless they can be master manipulators again. Benjamin Guerra wants to ask you, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'll let you answer the question. How much is truth with the Saints, and how much is manipulation of a market creation by Sean and Tom Brady's agent, Don Yee, to snag them deals next year?
No, look, I know that's out there a lot with the, look, there's some of that at play. There's no doubt, but that's how the game works. That they would gin up a market, but good reporters, people talking to the right people with good instincts. Look, this one report, it's kind of one thing it kind of gets under my skin a little bit is a national report tends to get more traction here than the local reports, and it never made any sense to me. The local team
reporters are there every day.
Yeah, we know by far more going on right now out there on Airline Drive than anybody nationally. But yet, once it comes up on a national website, everybody's running around like chickens with their head cut off. And look, I can tell you this, just from like behind the scenes, Mike Florio and Sean Payton are tight. I mean, I say they're tight. They're not going golfing together and drinking together, but they talk. So I guarantee you some of his reporting is informed by that camp. There's no doubt.
Yes.
So there's part of that. And Mike Florio is a legendary clickbait guy. Legendary. He knows what drives traffic. That's why he was supposedly carrying the banner for the Saints in Bountygate and carrying the banner for the Patriots in Deflategate. You know why he was doing that? Because it got traffic. Because somebody was on the Saints side. Somebody was on the Patriots side. And fans loved it. And they streamed to his website. And they championed him as a hero. All he was doing was driving up traffic for his website. So that's what he does. That's how he got to NBC from a startup website. I mean, he's a smart businessman.
You can see that Jeff Duncan is a major fan of Mr. Florio. That's
I know Mike. I know him. He's a good guy, actually. He's a brilliant businessman, but he's not a journalist. He traffics in traffic. I mean, that's how he got to where he's at.
Oh, the sad thing, Dunk, is there are a lot of non-journalists out there, and I know, people like you and I who are kind of old school sports writers. I think we're the last of the breed, actually, and we're trying to adapt to what we have now, but just the way of the world. I mean, the dinosaurs like us are moving along.
Here's what I'd say. The last thing about that report, none of that was coming from the Saints side. It was all coming from the other side.
From Sean Payton. There's no question.
Yeah, and look, I don't know if it was even Sean, the people around Sean, and I have no doubt that Tom Brady might end up with Sean Payton. They have the same agent. It could happen, but it also is a very sexy name to throw in there. My conversations with people in Payton's world, there's a lot of quarterbacks he's interested in. Jimmy Garoppolo's one he's always liked. He's going to be a free agent. What are the 49ers going to do with Garoppolo? He might be on the market. There's a lot of guys that you would consider, including Tom Brady. So
Jimmy Garoppolo's a free agent.
Tom Brady's got to decide where he wants to go. He may not want to go to where Sean goes. So I mean, it's not that simple that they're a package deal.
I think Tom Brady's going to retire. I got to be honest. I mean, I know you say no, and all I hear is no. But I'm sorry, but he's got all the records that he possibly could want now. He wanted to break some more records and pad some others. He is clearly, and I've been saying it for a couple years because it's sort of been Drew Brees like, where he starts off the season strong, and then you can sort of see the decline towards the later end of the year. I think that Tom Brady's decline started in like week 3. He's not accurate. He's not nearly as accurate as he was before. He can play if he wants to, and he knows that, but I just don't think he's gonna. We'll see.
I think you might be right. But here's the thing. I think if he finds a attractive location with a very good offensive line. I mean,
very good offensive line.
Their offensive line is a mess. I mean, like, he has no shot right now.
Don't disagree.
He has no ability.
He's not going back there.
It's the same thing that happened with Matt Ryan. I mean, when you have Matt Ryan, you've got to be able to protect him. And they can't protect for some reason in Indianapolis, so he's a liability right now. And look, the NFL's never going to be a perfect game. There's great athletes coming after you. You got to be able to manufacture a little bit. But if you can protect Brady, I think he can still be productive. But he's got to go to the right fit.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that if he had the perfect situation, I think he'll come back. But it would have to be perfect. It'd have to be a good coach, because he hasn't had a good coach in Tampa Bay. The one he had when he won the Super Bowl was bad. Todd Bowles is awful. I'm telling you right now, and they're going to end up winning division, or it could be Carolina. I'm not sure, but Todd Bowles needs to go. If I were in Buckland, you think Dennis Allen's bad. Dennis Allen is Sean Payton compared to Todd Bowles. He's been awful and made awful decisions throughout the season. I don't know what the hell he's doing over there. William Lopez asked Derek Carr, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Derek Carr's been to 3 Pro Bowls, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to say blah, blah, blah. I don't mean to diminish your question, William. It's just long. Saying how much he's thrown for, has had a weak supporting cast with the Raiders. I completely agree with that. Saints O-line and defense, he would flourish here. He and Dennis Allen have a rapport. Dunk, we kind of talked about this again, and I know a lot of people have disagreed, and we got to move on because I do want to talk about the other things here, but I think Derek Carr would be a great fit in New Orleans. I really do, if they can make it work.
Here's the thing that I think makes something like a Derek Carr possible and attractive. The Saints are going to have to be creative to fix the quarterback situation. So a guy like Carr becomes a very attractive option because you could trade for him. You could use one of your roster assets, which I actually think that's the Saints' path out of this mess right now, is to make some high-profile trades this offseason. They have some that are not even producing right now, but they have to move on from those guys. Maybe that's the way they get a quarterback. Maybe you make a deal with, say, a Mike Thomas, and you get a Derek Carr. You use that chip to get you something because they don't have a first-round draft pick. They can't use that to trade. So they have to get creative, and I think the best way to do it is with some of your high lucrative assets on your roster that aren't producing right now, because that to me is the biggest problem they've had this year. And I've said this before, is the core that they counted on is not what they're counting on right now. I mean, Mike Thomas is the highest paid guy on the team, and he hasn't produced in 3 years. Marshawn Lattimore is in the top 5. He's been a non-factor this year. Alvin Kamara has not produced this year. There's just been too many guys like that they thought were going to be their cornerstones that they've gotten nothing out of. And that can't happen when you're roster building and planning. All their planning was built around this core. So now I think they may have to reconsider who the core is. And when you've had what you've had this season is some guys like an Alante Taylor, like a Pete Werner, like a Chris Olave, these younger players that have stepped into these larger roles. And maybe now it changes your thinking of how the roster needs to be built going forward. And I think that's what Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis will be talking about this offseason.
And I think that's the only way you're going to get rid of a Michael Thomas because of his cap hit is to pair him with trade him for someone else who has a similar cap hit, right? So if you could make that move with the Raiders for Derek Carr and you might not like trading Michael Thomas for Derek Carr, and they might not want to do it. But that would be a great trade for the Saints, I think, if they could pull that off. Because then you get that
Mike Thomas's name out there. I'm not saying they're going to trade Mike Thomas.
No, but what I'm saying is having that kind of move is the only way you're going to be able to get rid of a Michael Thomas. You're not just – people keep saying trade Michael Thomas. You can't just trade him because of how much the cap hit comes. So the only way you're going to be able to move him is to move him to someone who has a similar type player that you're looking to get rid of, and that may end up working.
Yeah, look, there's some tradable assets on this team that actually I think Mike Thomas, if they moved him after June 1, I think they could do it. And it wouldn't be a significant they would still be taking a cap hit, but they'd actually be less than it would be if they kept him. So, you always got to look at the base salaries of these contracts. And once those are moved off your books, you save a lot. I just think that's the best path for this team. Marshawn Lattimore is pretty much untradeable. But he would be the type of asset. He's still a good player. But if you got to do – desperate times call for desperate measures. The Saints have 2 good young corners right now. Alante Taylor and Paulson Adebo have balled out this year. They're playing at a high level. You could actually trade a Marshawn Lattimore and get something for him because he's a valuable player at a valuable position. I'm not saying they're going to trade him. That's something they have to consider, even if it would take a massive cap hit, because – that's the only way out of this mess right now I see.
Jim Derry and Jeff Duncan here on Dattitude on Friday morning as we are live every Friday at 9:15 a.m. talking about the Saints. We'll figure out when the Saints are done after next week, or if the miracle of all miracles happens and they make the playoffs, we'll continue to ride. We'll figure out what we're going to do after that. I know Dunk's going to probably take a little bit of a break, but we're going to go definitely through the playoffs live on Dattitude, and then we'll figure out what's going to happen. But we're going to have about 12 to 15 minutes left in the show, so I do want to jump topics here. We're going to come back and make our Saints predictions at the end of the show. But there are other things to talk about, Dunk, including the Citrus Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, and the Pelicans. I'm going to start with the Pelicans, actually, because I got to go to the game for first time this season. I saw the Pels play. Zion Williamson was absolutely dominating in the second half of the game against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Wednesday. They don't have him. They don't win that game. But to me, it shows what kind of player he can be. And another thing I said on yesterday's Bayou Bet show was it also showed that, and the Pelicans have showed this a couple times this season, they can play what I would consider bad for them and still find a way to win a game. They've done that a couple times this season. They were nowhere near their best. Zion was, but in the second half, but the rest of the team wasn't, and they found a way to win that game. An impressive victory, in my opinion.
Well, and I see it two sides of that coin. I mean, one is they've had a tendency to do that, to play to the level of their competition. That bothers me a little bit. I mean, that was a game should never have been the way it was. And I didn't understand why they weren't getting Zion Williamson the ball before the desperation time in the second half. I mean, he got 3 shots in the first quarter, 4 in the second quarter. He's your best player on the team. And what I've said all along, I've told Christian Clark, our beat writer, this, and I don't know why it's taken so long for the organization, for the roster to recognize this is Zion Williamson's team. He's the alpha.
100%.
Quit trying to prop up. First it was Drew Holiday. Then it was, Brandon Ingram and the big 3 with CJ McCollum. No, this is let's move on from that nonsense and recognize that you have an elite talent. The ball needs to go to him, needs to run through him, and let everybody else be the supporting cast. This is a Zion Williamson team, and he's an alpha right now. That's what they recognize in that game. Get out of his way. Let him take over the game. That's what great players do. And it's taken too long for them to come to this organizational realization that it's a Zion world and everyone else is living in it.
The best part about what you just said is, and I 100% agree, is CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram don't care if Zion's out. It's not like because they're not alpha males. They're perfectly fine with being supporting cast guys. Brandon Ingram's still going to do his thing when he comes back and he gets over this toe injury, but he's completely fine being in that role. And real quickly, Debo says, Trey Murphy is the most improved player in the season. There's zero question that is true.
Right.
And so Trey Murphy is with what they've been able to do to have your alpha male Zion, like you talk about, and to have your next 2 best players in that role where they're okay with being supporting. That is a perfect scenario for a team like the Pelicans.
And here's the other thing I would say in defense of everybody out there. Zion's kind of brought a little bit on himself because if you know his personality, and I don't think people really know much about Zion. It's one of the things we're working on here internally is to do a big story on, what's this guy like off the court? I mean, people really don't know much about him. He doesn't do a lot of media. But I think from everything I've been able to gather, I mean, he's very much kind of a go along, get along guy. He's wants to fit in. He doesn't want the spotlight. And so that's a very admirable quality. But when you get on the court, you got to change that. You've got to become the man, and you got to take over games. I think he's got that in him. We saw that the other night. He needs to do more of that. And he's always just trying to fit in and not hog the spotlight. You notice it doesn't take a ton of shots to get to his goal. He wants everyone to be involved, but at some point you got to take over. And sometimes it can't be that late in the game when it's desperation time. You got to take over early. And I think that's what the maturation process, the evolution of Zion Williamson is going on right now.
I don't know the kid either, but doesn't he seem like a guy that just goes home and plays Xbox when he's done playing basketball?
Yeah, I mean, he's very much a homebody. He definitely goes out, but I mean, he's at least kid from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Yeah. He's a smaller town than that. So New Orleans is a big place for him.
Right.
That's why I've always told people with these again, go back to the national media, right? The narrative a year ago was Zion doesn't want to be in New Orleans. He wants to be in New York. That was so wrong. It was ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't problems internally, relationship-wise, between his camp and the organization. There definitely was. And there was some friction there, and there was some concern that it wasn't going to work. But it wasn't because he didn't like New Orleans and he wanted to be in the bright
It was
lights.
the coaching staff at the time, right?
No, it wasn't that. It was just some issues with his rehab practice, and he wasn't getting his rehab done, and that's why he went out to Portland, and they got him out of New Orleans basically. But that said, he's more wired like Tim Duncan, that kind of superstar, than say the guys that are immediately trying to bolt to LA like Anthony Davis. That's
Right.
not the way Zion's wired. He's very happy here. It's not the size of the market or the bright lights somewhere else. It was more about the respect level between the two camps. And they got all that ironed out, and everything's fine. That's why he signed his extension, and everybody's kumbaya right now.
All right, the Pelicans are about to finish up a homestand tonight, as a matter of fact, against the Philadelphia 76ers. Then they play a tough back-to-back. They got to go fly to Memphis and play on New Year's Eve in Memphis. No rest for the weary. They won't be spending New Year's in New Orleans, because then they go straight and play Philly again on Monday. So tough stretch coming up for the Pelicans at versus the 76ers at home tonight, Smoothie King Center, then at Memphis on Saturday, at 76ers coming up on Monday. All right, let's go back to football, and I do want to touch on Citrus Bowl and Cotton Bowl. Let's start off. I'm going to save the Cotton Bowl for last, because I think Tulane is the biggest story of this group. LSU, Purdue, Dunk. It looks like a lot of the it looks like Jaden Daniels is going to play for LSU. Purdue has had some major opt-outs, including their quarterback. The line is LSU minus 14.5. I'm not sure we're going to see a very exciting game in the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I wouldn't touch that game betting-wise. There's too many variables and unknowns there. If you put a gun to my head, I would probably take Purdue, just because I don't know.
So would I.
But I don't like either side of that game. I think this game's important for Brian Kelly and just to continue the momentum. Look, they stubbed their toe against A&M, lost to Georgia, pretty one-sided game. They need to get a win, go into this offseason with momentum. They had a strong recruiting class. And this all in all has to be viewed as a positive season for Brian Kelly and his staff. So I expect them to win this game. Jaden Daniels alone, I think, makes them a prohibitive favorite. But it won't surprise me if Purdue, I mean, they're kind of one of those gritty teams. They got nothing to lose in this game. They're being overlooked. I mean, don't underestimate that they're going to come out and play them tough and close, and could, if nothing else, backdoor cover you if you lay that heavy amount of points.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'd much rather play the under. I don't think there's going to be a lot of offense on this side. LSU doesn't have motivation enough to just keep scoring points. I'm not saying they won't, but I'd rather take the under if I was than take a side, and I'm not rushing to the window to do that either. All right, so we both like LSU to beat Purdue, but we both like Purdue. I think the cover 14.5 points is a whole lot of points, so we're going to kind of stay away from that side. All right, I have a feeling. Oh, and Adebo wants to ask one quick question. I think it's about LSU. Do y'all think Jaden can do next year if we want to win a championship? I saw him play bad against subpar teams. I'm not sure where you saw him play bad. I think he only had he had 2 average or below average games this season. One of them was, I guess you could call Florida State a below average. It was his first game with the program. I mean, I thought Jaden Daniels was an excellent fit for this team. And as an LSU alum, I'm thrilled he's coming back.
Yeah, he basically won the Alabama game by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I don't think losing Keishawn Butte is going to be a big.
I don't think it's a big deal at all.
I don't think it's a big deal at all. They basically made do without him for the first half of the season. He wasn't productive at all. There's obviously some issues there behind closed doors that we don't know about.
Ryan Thomas is a beast.
Yeah, they've got some good young receivers. They've got some recruits coming in. They're going to be fine. I don't have any issue with that. I think Butte probably is better off moving on.
I agree.
Try and get in the NFL. That seems to be what his goal was all along. So I think it's just going to be, a good situation for both sides. In this game, I do think, though, it does affect them to some degree in that, I agree with you. Like, why do they need to pile on the points against a Purdue team? If they get up 20 in the third quarter, I could see them kind of backing off the accelerator and just getting the win. So to me, that's a dangerous point spread. But I think the LSU controls this game largely because of Jaden Daniels.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw Garrett Nussmeier in the second half.
Yep.
I think Jaden Daniels just makes a cameo, plays a little bit because he deserves to play. And I'm glad, to me, it shows a lot that the kid's worked his tail off to play in this game because he has no reason to play. I mean, he could have easily said, you know what, I'd rather rehab and get ready for next year. And he wants to play. And that's the kind of kid that Brian Kelly wants. And I think this team has taken huge strides in just the course of a year. And I can't wait to see what they do next year because it's gonna be a fun season. I think they have an excellent chance to be up there near the top and start the season in the top 10 next year. It'll be interesting to see. All right, speaking of a team that could start the season in the top 10 next year, is the Tulane Green Wave, because I think they're going to be even better than they are now. Now, I know that they're going to be missing Tajay Spears, who is the big catalyst on offense for that team. And I love to watch. I've been watching Tajay Spears play football for 8 or 9 years now. The kid is phenomenal. What do you give them? And I think we're going to differ. I don't know because I haven't talked to you about it, but Tulane USC, what does the matchup look like? Cotton Bowl, Dallas on Monday, same time as LSU, unfortunately.
Well, I'm fascinated to watch this game, just to see Tulane on the same field with Southern Cal, like one of the
Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, the blue blood programs, storied traditional programs. This is going to be an amazing game to watch for a lot of reasons. Now, here's the way I feel about this game. I think Southern Cal is going to score points. They score points on everybody.
Yes,
they have
I agree.
Incredible quarterback. I know what Sean Payton thinks of him. He thinks he's a generational talent. So it's not that Tulane's got a good defense, but they haven't faced anything like they're going to face in this game on Monday. Can the Tulane offense keep pace? That's, to me, what it comes down to. The one thing I like about Tulane's chances in this game is they really got nothing to lose. I mean, They're not supposed to be in the game against a team like this. Willie Fritz will throw the kitchen sink at them. They'll go for it on fourth down. They might do some fakes to try and keep pace. Can Michael Pratt, Tajay Spears, can they do enough offensively to keep pace? Because I do think Lincoln Riley is going to want to win this game. In some ways, I think it hurts that Lincoln Riley is the coach because he was the coach of Oklahoma a year ago when Tulane went into Norman and could have beaten Oklahoma went down to the last series of the game, and Michael Pratt came up like a yard short. So they would have won that game. So rest assured, he has respect for this Tulane team, and he's building a program much like Brian Kelly, a big-time blue blood program where he's going to want to gather momentum going into this offseason. So I think him in his first year, he's going to have his team ready. I don't think they're going to come in here and be sleepwalking. I really don't. But I do think Tulane's going to have way more fans there than Southern Cal. Their fan base isn't going to be excited. This is more of a coaching game. Does Lincoln Riley have his team ready to play? I think they will, and I think it's going to be hard for Tulane to keep pace with them. So I like Southern Cal in this game.
Oh, we do agree then, because I agree with everything you just said. But in the end, I just think that I think that USC, you taking that next step up in program. This is a game where maybe next year Tulane could win a game like this because I think they're only going to improve. I think they're going to get better. I think they're going to be the clear-cut favorite in the American Athletic Conference, especially with Cincinnati leaving. And who else is leaving? Somebody else is leaving too. Central Florida is leaving too. So Tulane clearly the favorite next year. And so they could be in a similar type situation. So this is, whether they win or lose this game, it's a fantastic chance, fantastic experience for this program to get to a place like the Cotton Bowl. I've got several friends, and one is in his 70s and can't wait to go to Dallas. He's bringing his sons, and he's like, I may never get it. I've never had this chance to see Tulane play in a bowl like this, or since I was a kid. And so to have this chance, he says, I may never have this chance again. So, I think it's phenomenal for Tulane fans. I got plenty of them. And, I'm super thrilled for them. I'm an LSU guy, but, I've definitely softened on that. I'm rooting for Tulane this week. I hope they win. I hope I'm wrong. I don't have any money on it. I'm not betting on USC. Well, I did bet a little bit, but not enough to make me root against the Green Wave. But I think that Caleb Williams is a little bit too much. I know there's been a lot of talk of whether he'll play or not, but I think he's going to play. He has something to prove, and he's going to play. All right, Tulane, moving on from that and going back as we close the show out, we want to go back to the Saints and offer up our Saints predictions. You have about 2 minutes to get your predictions in if you want to do so. You can do it in your comment stream, YouTube, or Twitter. And if you're listening to it post live version, Well, you can email me if you want to say something to me at let's see, what is my email? jderry@theadvocate.com, at Jim Derry Jr. on Twitter. Dunk, we kind of touched on it in the beginning and talked about it. I know we've talked a lot about the Saints as a franchise and not as much about this matchup. We touched on it the first 5 to 10 minutes, so people that have joined us after that. This is not a good matchup. In fact, if you wanted to pick out the worst 1, 2, or 3 matchups for the Saints, this is one of them. The Saints, I think they match up better with a team like, I don't know. I mean, pick
I think that's better with the Niners.
Oh, 100%. They match up better than, and I think the Niners are a better football team. Yeah. But they match up better with the Niners because of the quarterback situation. The Saints still play running quarterbacks well. If it's Jalen Hurts, it's even worse. But even with Gardner Minshew, I just don't like who's going to stop A.J. Brown, who's going to stop Devontae Smith, and their defense is really playing lights out right now. Not a good matchup for the Saints at all.
Yeah, the Saints cannot afford any of the mistakes that they've made all year long, right?
Yeah.
Turnovers, penalties, those kind of things add up in any game. But against a team like this that's more talented than you and deeper than you, it's going to be a hostile environment. The Saints have lost 3 in a row there. I think they're 4-11 lifetime in Philly. It's just not – there's nothing that adds up here. The only good thing about it is I think the weather's supposed to be good. It's going to be in the 60s, so we should have good weather. But I just can't see the Saints keeping pace offensively because Philly scores on everybody. They're the highest scoring team in the league. So the Saints, these last few weeks where they played the Falcons and the Browns of the world, that's not going to cut it in this kind of game. They're going to have to get up in the 20s, I think, to even have a chance. And they just haven't been able to do that very much this season. I know they had a nice game against the Seahawks. They're going to have to be aggressive. They're going to have to be creative on offense, I think, to manufacture points. And when they do have their opportunities to make a big play, they've got to make them, and that's been elusive for them all season.
Might want to press the mute button. That usually helps. Jerry says 24-21 Saints. God bless you, Jerry. I love the optimistic fan. I wish I could be as optimistic as you are, my friend. I cannot. Debo says 31-24 Eagles. That Hurts is playing. If I were forced to pick a side with the spread, I would take Philadelphia. But I think actually more than Philadelphia, if we look at this real quick one last time, I would much rather take the over. I know both these teams have really good defenses, have been playing well in defense. I think this is going to be a higher scoring game. And like Dunk said, with the weather being perfect, I think that the Eagles are certainly going to score. And I think the Saints will find a way to score some points. Not enough to win the game, not enough to cover. I'm going to say, Dunk, let's say 20, let's call it 30-21 Eagles.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me too. I would say it's going to be one of those games, if you took the spread, you'd be sweating it either way.
Yes.
Fourth quarter. But I do think there is the potential for the Eagles to blow them out. I mean, if the Saints turn the ball over, this thing could get ugly.
The Saints will have to play their best game to stay alive. And look, I mean, I know there are a lot of people out there who are actually sweating this. I gave up on this more than 4 or 5 weeks ago. But if you've got that bet with the Saints over 7.5 wins, this is a must win. Forget about the playoffs. I don't care about the playoffs. Give me 8 wins, by God. So I hope the Saints win and give me a chance to get that 8th win next week. That would be great to cash in on that, but I'm not expecting it. It's probably not going to happen. I'm going to have to give up on it.
I think it would be one of the biggest upsets they've had in the last 5 years if they win this game.
I agree, but just think about it, and I hate to keep bringing this up, but just think had they held on to that Tampa game on Monday night, Dunk, the Saints would be literally in complete command right now. They could lose this game and still win the division.
Well, that's one where I think you have to say not only the players but also the coaches contribute. I mean, that was just a game you can't lose that game.
It's brutal.
And that's where I think Dennis Allen lost a lot of the goodwill with the fan base in that game.
I agree. And it wasn't all Dennis Allen's fault. It was partly his fault, but not all Dennis Allen's fault. But that one's going to sting. When you think about games in the annals of Saints lore, defeats that hurt, at least regular season defeats that hurt, that one's got to be in the top 10. And not just because you blew a 13-point lead to Tom Brady, but because of the ramifications of blowing that lead and what happened. Again, the Saints would be in complete control right now. I mean, I don't even know if they'd care who won the Carolina-Tampa game had they won that game.
Yeah, it kind of harkened back to the old Saints days, right? The tortured Saints days of where they would play the 49ers tough and somehow squander a big lead against the Niners, and they could never get over the hump. And that's really what, to be honest with you, if I pull back the lens and you really go from a 50,000-foot view of the Saints, that's what I would be concerned about is, are they going back to those days of,
Oh, my God, I can't do it, Dunk.
I'm just saying, JD,
I can't do it.
Before Sean Payton and Drew Brees got there, this was a 500 floundering kind of franchise, and it's exactly what they've got this year. And, yeah, there's always going to be hope and optimism you turn around, but the fact is you are what your record says you are. And we've seen that now this season with a lot of the same attention to detail, lack of it, discipline, all false start penalty, all those things that add up to you being a bad team. And, I know they've won these last 2 weeks, but again, if that ball didn't pop out in the Falcons game, I'm not sure we're sitting there talking about the playoffs right now.
Man, I the thought of going back and, you and I are probably, if, we have a good 10 years left in us and in this career, we hope to think that those 10 years would be spent with another, at least a major part of it, rebuilding a franchise. That's tough to think about. I mean, that's kind of depressing.
Yeah. Well, look, the roster's still talented enough to compete for a playoff spot, but there's a lot of work got to be done this offseason. And they've got to figure out the quarterback situation long term, and I'm not sure what path they take to get there.
So you're saying it's going to be a fun offseason?
It'll be fun for the beat writers. They got to have a lot of work.
That offseason very well could start after Sunday's game. So, I mean, for any other reason, let's hope the Saints win. Let's hope the Panthers win. Let's hope we can talk about possibilities again next week. Because in all reality, I mean, the Saints' theoretical probabilities are 3% right now for them to make the playoffs. If they were to win this week and the Bucs were to lose to the Panthers, it's the probability, you'd be surprised, but it doesn't go up all that much. It's still in the neighborhood of 18 to 22% because the Bucs would still have to lose to the Falcons next week.
Right.
And the Saints would still have to beat a good Panthers team. So at best, they'd be 50-50. So,
yeah, I think it's let's just say slim and none playoff hopes, and Slim left town a week ago.
All right, we'll see what happens. All right, Dunk, thank you for joining the show. Have a happy New Year, my friend, and we will talk to you next Friday.
Yeah, same to you. See you on the other side, brother.
And it's same to everyone else out there. We thank you for joining. We thank you for all the comments. We remember, after the show is over, I'm going to go and piece together. I talked to Uncle Big Nick this morning. We made our best bets. That will be on the regular podcast along with my monologue. You can find Dattitude wherever you find your podcast, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, all those great places. But Duncan and I will be live back on these same bat channels next Friday. Until then, we'll see you. Happy New Year, everybody. Have a great weekend. And Saints LSU Tulane, it should be fun.